The HOA president actually called the sheriff on me for swimming in my own backyard lake, a lake I'd owned for 15 years before her subdivision even existed. Picture this. I'm floating peacefully in my private lake at sunset, watching the loons call across the water, when suddenly police sirens cut through the evening crickets like a buzzsaw through silk. Sheriff Deputy Martinez pulls up my gravel driveway, looking as confused as I felt. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I have to issue you a citation per HOA complaint," he says, barely able to keep a straight face. Behind him, Karen Whitmore stands at my property line with her arms crossed and that artificial smile that never reaches her cold blue eyes. The citation? A $1,000 fine for unauthorized recreational water usage in a restricted zone. I'm standing there dripping wet, staring at this piece of paper. "Ma'am, this is my lake. I built this dock with my own hands when you were still living in California." What would you do if someone tried to control water on your own property? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I bet you've got HOA horror stories too. Little did Karen know I'd spent 20 years as a municipal finance director. Big mistake. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Garrett, and 3 years ago, I lost my wife Sarah to cancer. We'd been married 22 years, and losing her felt like someone ripped half my soul clean out. The grief was suffocating. You know that feeling where you can't breathe, can't think, can't imagine tomorrow without them. So I did what any broken-hearted widower would do. I moved to the middle of nowhere. Well, not exactly nowhere. I inherited my grandfather's 4-acre property in rural North Carolina, complete with a spring-fed lake that's been in our family since 1952. Pop built the original cabin with his own hands after coming back from Korea, and that lake saved his sanity just like it was about to save mine. Picture this place. Crystal clear water fed by underground springs, surrounded by towering pines that smell like Christmas morning. Every dawn, loons call across the water while mist rises like ghosts dancing on the surface. I'd sit on the dock Pop built, sipping coffee from Sarah's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away, watching rainbow trout rise to catch insects. The silence was therapeutic. No traffic, no deadlines, just the whisper of wind through branches and the occasional splash of a jumping fish. I'd spent 20 years as municipal finance director for Millbrook County, auditing budgets and catching crooked contractors who thought they could slip inflated invoices past the city. Back then, I'd learned that most government harassment stems from obscure ordinances that nobody bothers to challenge, knowledge that would prove invaluable when dealing with petty tyrants like Karen. But after Sarah died, I retired early. The lake became my sanctuary, my therapy, my reason to get up each morning. Then Karen Whitmore happened, like a hurricane wearing designer shoes and demanding to speak to Mother Nature's manager. In 2019, some developer bought the old logging road that bordered my north fence. Before I knew it, bulldozers were scraping away 100-year-old oak trees, and the sound of chainsaws replaced my peaceful mornings. The smell of diesel exhaust and fresh-cut lumber began drifting across my property like an industrial plague, mixing with the pine scent until it smelled like a hardware store had exploded in a forest. Within 2 years, 47 McMansions sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Lakeside luxury estates, they called it, which was hilarious, considering their only lake view was of my property. But hey, nothing says luxury like paying $800,000 to stare at someone else's water through your kitchen window, right? Karen moved in from California, driving a white BMW with personalized plates reading Real TR1 and an ego the size of Texas. She was everything you'd expect. Blonde highlights that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, designer purse that probably cost more than my truck, the kind of artificial smile that screams, "I've never met a homeowner's fee I didn't want to double." Within 6 months, she'd maneuvered herself into HOA president and started her campaign to civilize us poor country folk. It began with passive-aggressive neighborly visits. She'd click across my gravel driveway in her stilettos, which, let me tell you, stilettos on gravel sounds like a tap dancer having a seizure, bringing store-bought cookies while commenting how my rustic cabin had such character. The overpowering scent of her perfume would mix with the natural pine breeze like cheap air freshener in a funeral home. When I politely declined her offer to buy my land for 60 cents on the dollar, her plastic smile turned predatory. That manicured mask slipped just enough to show the calculating real estate shark underneath. The harassment started small. Complaints to the county about my unpermitted dock. I showed them permits from 2008, older than half her subdivision. Then she claimed my trout were contaminating the watershed. The environmental inspector actually laughed and said my lake was cleaner than most municipal water supplies. But Karen had done her homework. She discovered some forgotten 1920s ordinance about recreational water usage permits, the kind of bureaucratic fossil that survives in dusty law books like a legal parasite. During my municipal days, I'd seen how these dormant ordinances could be weaponized against property owners who didn't know their rights. She convinced the county commissioners, conveniently her former real estate clients, to amend it retroactively. Suddenly, any lake activity within 500 feet of residential developments required HOA approval. My lake, which had existed for 70 years before her subdivision was even a fever dream in some developer's brain, was now subject to Karen's authority. The woman who'd lived here for 18 months was trying to control water that had been in my family for 3 generations. That's when she made her first big mistake. She called the cops on a grieving widower just trying to heal in his own backyard. Bad move, Karen. Really bad move. 2 weeks after the swimming citation, Karen showed up at my door with reinforcements. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the morning coffee ritual that kept me sane, when I heard the crunch of multiple vehicles on my gravel driveway. The smell of fresh pine mixed with something that reminded me of bureaucratic desperation, that particular scent of cheap cologne and sweaty polyester that follows small-time con artists. Karen stepped out of her BMW wearing a triumphant smirk, followed by a guy in an ill-fitting county inspector uniform. His name tag read Randy Morrison, and he carried a clipboard like it was Excalibur, and he was the chosen king of petty harassment. "Mr. Henderson," Karen announced with fake sweetness, "we've received an anonymous complaint about your commercial fishing operation." I nearly choked on my coffee. Commercial fishing? Lady, I stock this lake for my own recreation. Randy puffed out his chest and slapped his clipboard against his leg, a nervous tick that would have been funny if he wasn't trying to shake me down. "Sir, you're going to need to show me your business license for this aquaculture facility, or I'll have to issue daily fines of $500 until you achieve compliance." Now, I've dealt with enough crooked inspectors during my municipal days to know when someone's running a con. Randy had that shifty-eyed look of a used car salesman trying to sell you a Honda with no engine. But I played along, pulling out my property deed and fishing permits. "These are for personal use," I explained patiently. "I stock about 50 trout twice a year for my own fishing." Randy barely glanced at the paperwork. "Anonymous complaint says you're running an unlicensed commercial operation. Until you prove otherwise, this lake is shut down." That night, while Karen probably celebrated with wine that cost more than most people's car payments, I fired up my old laptop. 20 years of municipal work had taught me that every bureaucrat leaves a paper trail, and Randy Morrison was about to get his examined under a very bright microscope. First discovery: Randy's inspector credentials had expired 2 years ago. The man threatening me with daily fines wasn't even legally authorized to inspect a lemonade stand, let alone my property. I remembered a case from my county days where a fake inspector had tried similar tricks. The key was documenting everything before they realized they'd been caught. I screenshot his expired license, filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board, and started digging deeper. A thorough search of public records revealed Randy had been conducting inspections across 3 counties using his expired credentials. This wasn't just incompetence, it was systematic fraud. When the state board contacted Randy about his unlicensed activities, he apparently had a complete meltdown. Word travels fast in small counties, and I heard through the courthouse grapevine that he'd called Karen in a panic, begging her to fix this somehow. Karen, being the strategic genius she was, decided the best defense was a good offense. 3 days later, an official-looking bill appeared in my mailbox. The Lakeside Luxury Estates HOA was now charging me a liability insurance surcharge of $500 per month for dangerous water activities. They'd backdated it to January. It was now July, so I supposedly owed $3,000. I had to admire the audacity. Karen was basically charging me rent to swim in my own lake that my grandfather had dug with a borrowed bulldozer in 1952, while Randy faced a $10,000 fine and possible criminal charges for impersonating an inspector. I was researching property law precedents. Years ago, I'd studied a landmark Supreme Court case about government overreach, Lucas versus South Carolina, where some bureaucrats tried to ban all development on a guy's coastal property. The court ruled that government can't eliminate all economically beneficial use of property without compensation. The principle was simple. They can't force you to pay fees for legal activities on your own land. Armed with this precedent, I filed a preliminary injunction in county court to stop Karen's shakedown. But I also had a surveyor come out to confirm my property boundaries. Call it intuition from dealing with shady characters for 2 decades. The survey results were like Christmas morning and winning the lottery rolled into one. Karen's precious subdivision encroached 15 feet onto state forest land. 3 of the McMansions, including one belonging to her cousin Danny, were technically trespassing on public property. I made an anonymous tip to the state forestry department. Sometimes the best revenge is just following the rules while watching your enemies hang themselves with their own rope. Within a week, 3 HOA houses received violation notices for illegal land use. The potential fines? $50,000 per structure, plus removal costs. Suddenly, Karen's measly $3,000 bill looked like pocket change. The next morning, Karen stormed across my property line like Sherman marching through Georgia. Except Sherman probably had better manners. Her face was red enough to stop traffic, and she was screaming about harassment and ruining property values, loud enough to scare the loons off my lake and probably wake the dead in the next county. "You think you're so smart," she shrieked, jabbing a manicured finger in my direction. "I'm going to sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress." I calmly handed her the court papers for my injunction hearing, still warm from the printer. "See you in court, Karen. Bring your checkbook. And maybe a good lawyer, because you're going to need both." Her mouth opened and closed like one of my trout gasping for air. The sound of her heels retreating on gravel was music sweeter than any loon song. Karen apparently learned nothing from the Randy debacle, because 2 weeks later she decided to escalate to psychological warfare. And by psychological warfare, I mean she called Channel 7 News. I was feeding my trout their morning breakfast. Yes, I actually had a feeding schedule, don't judge me, when I heard the rumble of a news van coming up my driveway. The crunch of gravel under those heavy tires has a distinct sound, like someone stepping on bubble wrap made of rocks. Out stepped reporter Megan Torres, followed by a cameraman who looked like he'd rather be covering literally anything else. Behind them, Karen emerged from her BMW wearing what I can only describe as her concerned citizen costume. Conservative blazer, minimal makeup, and an expression that suggested she was fighting back tears over the tragic plight of endangered property values. "Mr. Henderson," Megan called out, approaching with that practiced reporter stride, "we're here about concerns that your lake activities are threatening the community's water supply." I looked at Karen, who was positioning herself strategically in the background with 3 neighbors she'd apparently recruited as props. Their faces showed the kind of manufactured concern you see in pharmaceutical commercials right before they list the side effects. "Ma'am," I said, setting down my fish food, "I'm not sure what concerns you're referring to." The questions started coming fast. Was I aware of the environmental risks? Did I care about children's safety? What about property values? Karen had clearly coached Megan with loaded questions designed to make me look like some kind of ecological terrorist. But here's the thing about spending 20 years in municipal meetings. You learn to stay calm when people are trying to make you look bad on camera. I invited the crew to test my lake water right there on the spot. The look on Karen's face when I dipped a clear glass straight from the lake and drank it while maintaining eye contact with the camera? Priceless. Like watching someone realize they'd brought a squirt gun to a tank fight. "This water has been tested by County Environmental Services 3 times in the past year," I explained calmly, pulling out a folder thicker than a phone book. "Lake's cleaner than most municipal supplies. Would you like to see the reports?" I handed Megan Torres copies of everything. Environmental inspection reports showing pristine water quality, historical property deeds proving my water rights dating back to 1892, county permits that were all current and valid, and photographs documenting Karen's subdivision encroachment on state land. You could practically see the story shifting in real time. Megan's questions became sharper, more focused on why Karen would make claims that didn't match the documentation. Karen started sweating despite the October breeze carrying the scent of burning leaves from somewhere down the valley. "Mrs. Whitmore," Megan asked, turning the camera toward Karen, "do you have any evidence supporting your claims about water contamination?" Karen's response was a masterclass in verbal gymnastics. She stammered about potential risks and community concerns, while her eyes started twitching, a tell I'd learned to recognize from countless budget meetings with crooked contractors. That's when I decided to share what I'd learned about Karen's track record. During my years auditing municipal contracts, I'd developed a network of contacts across several states. A few phone calls had revealed that Karen Whitmore wasn't exactly a newcomer to neighborhood destruction. "Megan," I said, "you might want to look into Mrs. Whitmore's previous communities in California and Arizona. Interesting patterns emerge when you follow the paper trail." Karen went pale under her foundation. She knew I'd done my homework. The interview ended with Karen demanding equal time to present the HOA perspective. Megan agreed to a follow-up segment, which turned out to be Karen's second big mistake. While I prepared for round 2 by gathering more documentation, Karen apparently spent the week calling in favors. The station manager turned out to be Jim Patterson, who'd worked with me on several municipal transparency initiatives back in my county days. Small world, especially when you've built a reputation for honest accounting and catching financial fraud. The follow-up broadcast aired the next Thursday. Megan Torres presented a balanced piece showing both properties, but Karen's performance was pure comedy gold. She contradicted herself multiple times, got defensive when asked simple questions, and accidentally admitted she'd never actually tested the subdivision's well water that she claimed to be protecting. Meanwhile, I provided calm, fact-based responses backed up with documentation. The visual contrast was striking. Karen looking increasingly frantic while I sat there with binders full of evidence like some kind of bureaucratic superhero. Community response was overwhelmingly supportive. My voicemail filled up with neighbors thanking me for standing up to Karen's bullying. Several mentioned they'd been afraid to speak out before, worried about retaliation through HOA violations. But Karen wasn't done. Humiliated by the news coverage and facing questions about her past, she decided to go nuclear. The next Monday, I received a visit from the county health department. Karen had filed a complaint claiming my cabin's septic system was leaking into the lake, contaminating the watershed and threatening public health. She demanded an immediate cease and desist on all lake activities pending a full environmental investigation. The health inspector, a professional named Marcus who actually knew what he was doing, arrived with proper credentials and legitimate authority. I welcomed him with complete transparency, even offering coffee while he conducted his inspection. When Marcus discovered that my cabin used a state-of-the-art composting toilet system with zero sewage entering the lake, his reaction was not what Karen had expected. "This is actually an eco-friendly showcase," he told me, taking photographs of the system. "Mind if I get your contractor's information? I know several people who'd love to install something like this." Karen's complaint was officially dismissed as frivolous and malicious, language that would prove useful in future legal proceedings. The taste of victory was sweet, but I knew this was just the beginning. Karen was escalating faster than a rocket ship, and I had a feeling her next move would be even more desperate. If Karen had any sense left, she would have backed down after the septic system fiasco. Instead, she doubled down like a gambler with a mortgage payment due and pocket aces that turned out to be a pair of twos. Friday afternoon, I was splitting firewood behind my cabin, the rhythmic thunk of the axe helping me think through Karen's escalating insanity, when I heard the familiar sound of a delivery truck struggling up my gravel driveway. The postal worker looked apologetic as he handed me a certified letter thick enough to choke a horse. The return address made me smile. Rutherford and Associates, Charlotte's most expensive legal firm. Karen had hired the kind of lawyers who charge $600 an hour to write strongly worded letters threatening legal action over parking disputes. The cease and desist demanded I immediately stop all nuisance water activities that allegedly violated noise ordinances. According to their creative interpretation of municipal law, my swimming created excessive splashing sounds that disrupted the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties. They wanted $5,000 in mediation fees to avoid a full lawsuit. I had to admire the creativity. Karen was literally trying to find me for making splash sounds while swimming in my own lake. The woman had turned petty tyranny into an art form. But the legal letter was just the opening act. Over the weekend, Karen organized what I can only describe as a surveillance campaign. HOA members began driving past my property at 5-mile-per-hour speeds, taking photos and videos of everything I did. Someone left passive-aggressive notes on my truck windshield about respecting community standards and being a good neighbor. The county suddenly became very interested in my property. Building inspector, Monday, fire marshal Tuesday, tax assessor Wednesday. Each visit triggered by anonymous complaints about potential violations. The smell of bureaucratic harassment hung in the air thicker than morning fog over the lake. During my municipal days, I'd seen this tactic before, death by 1,000 paper cuts. The goal wasn't to find actual violations. It was to exhaust me with constant harassment until I gave up and moved away. Karen had apparently read the playbook on how to destroy property owners through legal attrition. But Karen had made a critical error. She'd picked a fight with someone who knew how to research public records and follow money trails. That weekend, I spent 2 days in the basement of the county records office, a place that smells like old paper and broken dreams. What I discovered was better than Christmas morning. Karen's subdivision had been built using an emergency wetlands permit that required a 25-foot buffer zone from all natural water sources. 3 houses, including Karen's own McMansion, had been built within the buffer zone. The violations carried potential fines of $10,000 per day, with possible demolition orders if the environmental impact was severe enough. But that wasn't the best part. I also requested the HOA's financial statements under North Carolina's public records law, something any property owner within the association's jurisdiction can do. What I found made Randy's fake inspector credentials look like a parking ticket. Karen had been treating the HOA treasury like her personal piggy bank. No competitive bidding for maintenance contracts, despite state law requiring it for expenditures over $10,000. Her husband Rick's landscaping company held an exclusive $45,000 annual contract. Pool maintenance went to her cousin Danny for $28,000 a year. The legal fees category included payments to her personal attorney for matters completely unrelated to HOA business. Years ago, I'd worked on a case involving a municipal official who'd used similar self-dealing schemes. The key was documenting the pattern and showing deliberate intent to defraud. Karen had left a paper trail wider than Interstate 85. While I was building my case, Karen filed for a temporary restraining order against me. She claimed I was stalking and harassing HOA members and had threatened violence during our property boundary dispute. The court hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning, with sheriff's deputies serving papers while I was feeding my trout their evening meal. I hired Patricia, an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for eating corrupt board members for breakfast. Patricia reviewed my documentation and smiled the kind of smile that makes opposing lawyers very nervous. "Garrett," she said, spreading the evidence across her conference table, "Karen's about to learn why you don't bring a knife to a gunfight." The court hearing was pure theater. Karen arrived with 3 HOA members as witnesses, all wearing their Sunday best and practicing their concerned citizen expressions. I brought a binder of evidence that could have doubled as a boat anchor. Judge Margaret Yates, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years of experience dealing with frivolous lawsuits, reviewed the materials with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. Karen's witnesses contradicted each other under basic questioning, and my security camera footage clearly showed who was doing the actual harassing. When Karen's attorney tried to present evidence of my threatening behavior, Patricia produced audio recordings of every interaction. Karen's voice on the recordings sounded increasingly unhinged, while mine remained calm and professional throughout. Judge Yates dismissed Karen's restraining order request and issued a temporary protective order against Karen, ordering the HOA to cease surveillance and trespassing. She also awarded me $2,500 in attorney fees and warned Karen about potential perjury charges for making false statements under oath. Karen's meltdown in the courthouse parking lot made local news. She screamed at the judge about the corrupt system and ranted about me destroying the community loud enough to wake the dead in 3 counties. The newspaper reporter who witnessed the outburst wrote a front-page story titled, "HOA President's Courtroom Tantrum." That evening, several Subdivision residents approached me privately. They revealed Karen had been harassing them too. Pool parties shut down for noise violations, garden decorations deemed architecturally inappropriate, parking violations for guests staying more than 4 hours. Some residents were actually considering a recall petition to remove Karen from the board. But while I was savoring this small victory, Patricia had discovered something in the original HOA charter that would change everything. Hidden in the dense legal language was a clause I'd completely missed, one that would shift the balance of power permanently. Any property owner within 1,000 feet of the subdivision could petition to join the HOA as a voting member. My lake property not only qualified geographically, but as the largest single parcel, I would control 30% of the voting shares. Karen had been so focused on harassing me, she'd never realized I could simply join her little kingdom and vote her out. The irony was delicious. In her desperation to control my property, Karen had handed me the keys to controlling hers. While Patricia was preparing for our next legal move, she made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been reviewing the original subdivision plat maps, those boring technical documents that most people never bother reading, when she found something that made her call me at 6 in the morning. "Garrett, you need to get down here immediately," she said, her voice containing the kind of excitement lawyers only get when they find a smoking gun. Karen's entire development is built on a house of cards, and it's about to collapse. I drove to her office through the early morning mist rolling off my lake, the smell of damp pine needles mixing with anticipation. Patricia had coffee brewing and documents spread across her conference table like a detective solving a murder case. The revelation was stunning. Karen's development violated the original county master plan in ways that could shut down the entire subdivision. The area had been designated for low-density rural residential development, meaning a maximum of 16 homes on the 95-acre parcel. Karen's 47 McMansions exceeded the zoning density by over 300%. But here's where it got interesting. The developer had gotten around this restriction through something called an emergency housing shortage provision, a loophole created after Hurricane Florence displaced thousands of families in 2019. Emergency variances allowed higher density development temporarily to address the housing crisis. The key word was temporarily. These emergency provisions expired after 5 years unless specifically renewed by the county commission. Karen's subdivision variance would expire on December 15th, just 6 months away. If the variance wasn't renewed, 31 houses would have to be demolished to meet the original zoning requirements. The remaining 16 homeowners would face a financial apocalypse. Patricia pulled up the HOA financial projections on her laptop. Current assessments are calculated assuming 47 paying units at $320 per month, she explained. If 31 houses get demolished, the remaining residents would have to cover the same operating costs with only 16 units. The math was brutal. Monthly assessments would jump from $320 to $940 per house. Most residents had no idea they were living in a financial time bomb. But the real bombshell was what Patricia found in Karen's correspondence files, obtained through our discovery process. Karen had known about the expiration date all along. She'd been secretly lobbying county commissioners for renewal, but her harassment campaign against me had backfired spectacularly. During my years in municipal finance, I'd worked with several current planning commission members on various projects. They remembered me as the guy who always followed proper procedures and caught financial irregularities before they became scandals. Commissioner Martinez had specifically mentioned that nice man with the lake as an example of responsible rural development. Karen's public meltdown and legal harassment had turned potential allies into enemies. Her chances of getting the variance renewed were somewhere between slim and non-existent. Patricia then showed me the original HOA charter documents, focusing on a section that made my coffee taste sweeter. The charter defined membership as all property owners within the community boundaries, which included a 100-foot buffer zone around the entire subdivision. My property fell within that buffer zone by 23 feet. As a pre-existing property owner with legal standing, I had the right to join the HOA as a voting member. The charter specified that voting power was proportional to property size and assessed value. My 4-acre lakefront property was assessed at $485,000, while the average subdivision home was assessed at $225,000. Under proportional voting rules, I would control 31% of all HOA decisions. If you join the HOA, Patricia explained, you can block any assessment increases, call special elections for board positions, access all financial records without jumping through public records hoops, and propose charter amendments with your voting block. The irony was perfect. Karen had spent months trying to control my property through HOA regulations. Now I could join her HOA and control her, but as I sat there looking at the legal documents, I realized something important. I didn't want to destroy this community. Many residents were victims of Karen's schemes just like me. The real solution wasn't revenge, it was removing the cancer and healing the patient. My goal shifted from payback to community restoration. Remove Karen, fix the financial problems, create a sustainable HOA that actually served its residents instead of feeding one person's power addiction. Karen, meanwhile, had somehow learned that information about the zoning expiration was leaking. She'd called an emergency HOA meeting for the following Saturday, claiming urgent financial matters required immediate attention. The meeting notice went out with minimal advance warning, a classic suppression tactic to limit attendance. I had 72 hours to file my HOA membership application and gather support from dissatisfied residents. Saturday morning would become the showdown for control of the community's future. Patricia worked through the weekend preparing legal documents while I reached out to residents who'd approached me after the courthouse victory. The race was on, and the winner would control not just the HOA but the financial survival of 47 families. The taste of justice was within reach, but but it would require perfect execution and a little help from neighbors who were tired of living under Karen's reign of petty terror. Saturday morning couldn't come fast enough, but I had 3 days to build an alliance that could take down Karen's empire of petty tyranny. The smell of fresh coffee and determination filled my cabin as Patricia and I mapped out our strategy like generals planning D-Day. First recruit, Janet Morrison, the retired teacher who lived on Maple Court and had been documenting Karen's overreach for 2 years. Janet had that quiet steel you find in educators who've dealt with difficult parents and budget cuts. Karen had fined her $200 for installing a non-conforming bird bath. Apparently, concrete doves violated the architectural covenant's vision of suburban paradise. When I called Janet, her voice carried 20 years of suppressed frustration. "Mr. Henderson, I've been waiting for someone to stand up to that woman. What do you need?" A Janet spiral notebook contained 2 years' worth of violations, fines, and harassment incidents, organized with the precision of a teacher's grade book. She documented everything from Karen's surprise inspections to the HOA board meetings where dissenting voices were systematically ignored. Next was Bob Martinez, an accountant who lived on Oak Ridge Drive and had the misfortune of asking questions about HOA finances. Bob was the kind of numbers guy who noticed when spending didn't add up, a dangerous trait in Karen's world of creative accounting. "I've been trying to review actual invoices for months," Bob explained when we met at the local diner, the smell of bacon grease and honest conversation filling the air. "Karen claims everything's proprietary information, but I've found $43,000 in unexplained expenses just in this year's budget." Bob's spreadsheet showed a pattern of financial irregularities that would make any auditor's heart race. Landscaping bills that didn't match the actual work performed, equipment purchases with no delivery records, legal fees for services that had nothing to do with HOA business. Our third ally was Lisa Park, a civil engineer who'd originally designed the subdivision's drainage system before Karen modified the plans without proper permits. Lisa had that practical intelligence of someone who builds things that have to work in the real world. "Karen changed my drainage specifications to save money," Lisa explained during our strategy meeting at my cabin. "Now her modifications dump runoff directly toward your lake. The violations could shut down the entire subdivision if the state environmental agency gets involved." Lisa brought technical expertise and professional credibility, exactly what we'd need to counter Karen's emotional manipulation tactics. Friday evening, we held our final strategy session around my kitchen table. Patricia had prepared 3 binders of evidence, each organized for maximum impact. The plan was surgical: expose Karen's financial fraud, reveal the zoning time bomb, and present my membership application as the solution to both problems. Bob would handle the financial presentation, using simple charts that any homeowner could understand. $45,000 to Rick's landscaping company for work valued at $18,000. $28,000 for pool maintenance that was actually performed weekly instead of the contracted daily service. Legal fees that included Karen's personal divorce attorney, paid with community funds. Janet would read testimonials from harassed residents, showing the human cost of Karen's power addiction. Lisa would explain the infrastructure violations and environmental risks that Karen had hidden from the community. During my municipal years, I'd learned that people respond to stories more than statistics. We needed residents to see Karen as the problem, not just a symptom of bad governance. Every violation, every fine, every act of harassment was part of a pattern designed to consolidate power and extract money from the community. Patricia reviewed the legal procedures we'd need to follow. North Carolina HOA law required that emergency board elections could be called by any member presenting evidence of financial mismanagement. My membership application would give me standing to make such a motion, and my 31% voting share would make it impossible for Karen's supporters to block. The backup plan was equally important. If Karen tried to end the meeting early, Patricia would cite specific bylaw requirements for addressing member concerns. If Karen claimed I couldn't speak as a non-member, my application gave me immediate standing. If she called police, all our documentation was legally obtained and we'd be on public property. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes everything feel possible. We met at my cabin at 7 a.m., 3 hours before the scheduled HOA meeting. The smell of bacon and coffee mixed with nervous energy as we reviewed our final preparations. Janet was nervous but determined. Someone has to stop her before she destroys this community completely. Bob was excited about finally exposing the financial fraud. Numbers don't lie, and Karen's numbers have been lying for 3 years. Lisa brought maps and technical drawings that would make Karen's infrastructure violations impossible to ignore. When residents see how much money she's wasted on shortcuts, they'll understand why their fees keep increasing. I felt calmer than I had in months. After years of reactive defense against Karen's attacks, we were finally going on offense with overwhelming evidence and legal authority. Patricia distributed copies of all our documents and reminded everyone about Karen's likely tactics. We should expect personal attacks, false accusations, and emotional manipulation. The key was staying focused on facts and letting Karen's behavior speak for itself. At 9:30, we loaded our evidence into Bob's van and drove to the community center. The taste of anticipation was sweet, mixed with the satisfaction of knowing we'd done our homework thoroughly. Karen's reign of petty terror was about to end, and justice would be served with a side of proper financial documentation. The only question was whether Karen would go quietly or take the entire subdivision down with her in a blaze of narcissistic fury. The week leading up to our showdown, Karen went completely off the rails. Like a cornered animal with a law degree and access to social media, she launched what I can only describe as a scorched earth campaign designed to destroy my reputation before I could destroy hers. It started Friday night with threatening texts to Janet. "Spreading lies about HOA business is grounds for a defamation lawsuit," Karen wrote at 11:47 p.m. Apparently, insomnia and desperation make great bedfellows. She followed up by calling Bob's accounting firm Monday morning, claiming he was using company resources to harass innocent community volunteers. The pièce de resistance was her call to the state engineering board, reporting Lisa for professional misconduct because she dared to point out Karen's unpermitted drainage modifications. 3 women who'd simply asked questions about their community were now facing professional retaliation from a HOA president who'd completely lost touch with reality. But Karen wasn't done. She filed another police report claiming I'd threatened violence during our property boundary dispute, conveniently forgetting that our entire interaction had been recorded on my security cameras. The officer who took the report was the same Deputy Martinez who'd originally cited me for swimming, and his report noted Karen's increasingly erratic behavior and inability to provide specific evidence. Saturday morning brought Karen's masterstroke of stupidity. I arrived early at the community center to find a handwritten sign taped to the door. Meeting relocated to 847 Maple Court due to security concerns. Karen's garage. The woman had moved an HOA meeting for 47 households into her 2-car garage, which could maybe hold 15 people if half of them were malnourished teenagers. The smell of motor oil and desperation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Patricia immediately objected, citing HOA bylaws requiring adequate meeting space for all members. Karen's response was to claim security threats required limited attendance. Apparently, transparent governance was now a public safety issue. When residents started arriving and found themselves standing in Karen's driveway unable to hear anything, the grumbling began. Nothing exposes petty tyranny quite like forcing your neighbors to stand outside in October weather because you're afraid of democracy. "You don't even live here," Karen shrieked when I produced my membership application. "You can't tell us what to do." The look on her face when Patricia explained my legal right to join under the original charter was priceless, like watching someone realize they'd just stepped on a landmine. Her core supporters, including husband Rick and cousin Danny, suddenly understood that my 31% voting share would make their little power circle irrelevant. Karen's meltdown began in earnest. She screamed about illegal interference with a private association and claimed I'd forged documents and bribed county officials. The accusations became increasingly wild and paranoid, including suggestions that I was part of some elaborate conspiracy involving the county commissioners, the state forestry department, and probably the Illuminati. Several residents stepped back from Karen's ranting, clearly uncomfortable with her unhinged behavior. When your HOA president starts sounding like a street corner conspiracy theorist, even the most loyal supporters begin questioning their allegiance. Patricia invoked HOA Bylaw Article 12, Emergency Procedures, which required a vote to relocate when meeting space was inadequate. During my municipal days, I'd seen similar tactics used by city council members trying to suppress public input. The solution was always the same: force a vote and let democracy work. With 23 residents now present, the vote to move to the community center was 18 yes, 5 no. Karen refused to acknowledge the results, claiming only official board members could call meetings. Patricia cited state law showing that members could override board decisions when constitutional rights were being violated. That's when Karen called the police. Deputy Martinez arrived looking like a man who'd rather be directing traffic or chasing actual criminals. When Karen demanded arrests for illegal assembly, he patiently explained this was a civil matter and suggested they work it out like adults, advice that fell on deaf ears. The crowd relocated to the community center, a public building where Karen's suppression tactics wouldn't work. 31 residents attended, the largest HOA turnout in Subdivision history. The energy in the room felt electric, like a powder keg waiting for someone to strike a match. Karen arrived 20 minutes late with her attorney on speakerphone, trying to claim the meeting was invalid due to the location change. Residents were increasingly frustrated with her procedural obstruction. They'd come for answers about their community's finances and governance, not to watch their HOA president have a public breakdown. I maintained strategic patience, taking notes while Karen dug her hole deeper with every objection. Residents began asking pointed questions about landscaping expenses, pool maintenance costs, and legal fees. Karen's answers became evasive, contradictory, and increasingly desperate. When Bob Martinez stood up and asked about the $45,000 landscaping contract, Karen claimed it was proprietary information that couldn't be discussed publicly. Bob produced public records showing the inflated billing, and Rick Whitmore visibly started sweating in the corner like a man watching his gravy train derail in real time. Desperate to change the subject from financial fraud, Karen launched a personal attack on me that would have made a political operative blush. She brought up Sarah's death, suggesting I was mentally unstable and posed a danger to families. She accused me of stalking innocent children and being a dangerous loner who threatens property values. The room went dead silent. Even Karen's supporters looked disgusted by her willingness to weaponize a widower's grief for political gain. Janet Morrison stood up, her voice shaking with righteous anger. Karen, you fined me $200 for a bird bath. When did we become so cruel to our neighbors? Other residents began sharing their own stories of harassment and intimidation. The dam had broken, and years of suppressed frustration came pouring out like water through a burst levee. Karen tried to adjourn the meeting, but residents refused to leave. The taste of democracy was too sweet after years of authoritarian rule. I approached the podium with my documentation binders, and Karen made one last desperate stand. I won't let you destroy our community, she screamed. I'm not trying to destroy it, I replied calmly. I'm trying to save it. The stage was set for the final confrontation. The week between our garage confrontation and the final showdown, Karen went completely nuclear. I'm talking full-scale, burn everything to the ground desperation that would have impressed Napoleon during his retreat from Moscow. She hired a private investigator, some sketchy ex-cop named Wade who drove a beat-up sedan and wore cologne that smelled like regret mixed with cigarettes. Wade started following me around town, taking pictures through my cabin windows, and even approached my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, asking questions about my mental state and daily habits. Karen's social media campaign escalated to pure fiction. She created fake profiles, spreading rumors that I was planning to build a commercial fishing operation that would destroy property values. She posted doctored screenshots of threatening messages allegedly from me, complete with creative spelling errors to make them look authentic. The crown jewel of her smear campaign was claiming that Sarah had actually committed suicide and I was covering it up to protect my reputation. The woman was now weaponizing my wife's battle with cancer for political gain. Even by Karen's standards, this was a new low that would have impressed Stalin. But while Karen was busy destroying her remaining credibility with increasingly unhinged behavior, I was putting together the final pieces of evidence that would end her reign permanently. Bob Martinez had found the smoking gun. Bank records showing Karen used $85,000 from the HOA reserve fund as a down payment on a vacation condo in Myrtle Beach. The withdrawal was documented as emergency roof repairs for the community center, but the same day the money left the account, Karen closed on Beach Breeze Condominiums Unit 247. Her social media posts from that weekend showed her celebrating at the beach while homeowners thought their reserve fund was paying for infrastructure improvements. The level of brazen theft was breathtaking, like robbing a bank and then posting vacation photos with the stolen money. Patricia had been busy too, working with the county prosecutor to build a criminal case. Each fraudulent transaction carried a potential 2 to 10-year sentence under North Carolina's embezzlement statutes. Karen wasn't just facing removal from the HOA board, she was looking at serious prison time. Meanwhile, Wade, the private investigator, overplayed his hand. Tuesday evening, Mrs. Patterson called the sheriff's office after catching him trespassing on her property and trying to peek into her windows. When deputies arrested Wade for intimidation and illegal surveillance, he immediately threw Karen under the bus to save his own skin. The arrest report specifically mentioned that Wade had been hired by HOA President Karen Whitmore to gather compromising information on a community member. Karen's intimidation campaign was now part of the official criminal record. Thursday brought the final piece of evidence I needed. My own investigator, a reputable firm that didn't smell like an ashtray, delivered a comprehensive report on Karen's history. She'd pulled identical scams in 3 previous communities across California, Arizona, and Florida. The pattern was always the same: move in, take over the HOA, embezzle funds, create chaos, and disappear before anyone could prosecute. 2 criminal cases were still pending from her previous communities, and there was a civil judgment for $127,000 that she'd never paid. Karen wasn't just a petty neighborhood tyrant. She was a serial community destroyer with a proven track record of financial fraud. The morning of our final confrontation, I noticed a U-Haul trailer attached to Karen's BMW. She was planning to flee immediately after the meeting, probably with whatever money she could steal before the authorities caught up. The community center was packed beyond capacity. 67 residents attended, more than had ever shown up for any community event. Megan Torres and her Channel 7 news crew set up discreetly in the back, having gotten a tip about the ongoing HOA investigation. County Prosecutor Williams sat in the back row with Detective Hayes, ready to execute an arrest warrant as soon as Karen incriminated herself on camera. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez stationed himself outside, knowing Karen's history of volatile behavior when cornered. Karen arrived wearing expensive new jewelry that had definitely been purchased with HOA funds, her face showing the kind of desperate confidence you see in pyramid scheme organizers just before the collapse. Her husband Rick was notably absent. Apparently he'd already fled to relatives in Oklahoma with their liquid assets. She tried to control the meeting from the start, limiting discussion and claiming security concerns required an abbreviated agenda. But when I requested recognition under Robert's Rules of Order, Patricia stood up with our completed membership documentation. "The review period expired yesterday," Patricia announced clearly. "Mr. Henderson is now an official HOA member with 31% voting share." Karen's face went white as the power dynamics shifted permanently. The room buzzed with excitement as residents realized Karen no longer controlled their community's future. I approached the podium carrying 3 binders of evidence, my voice calm and professional from 20 years of municipal meetings. "I'd like to present some financial irregularities for board review." Karen jumped up, screaming, "You can't discuss confidential HOA business!" I looked directly at the news camera. "Ma'am, embezzlement isn't confidential. It's criminal." The taste of justice was finally within reach, and Karen's reign of petty terror was about to end in spectacular fashion. All I had to do was present the evidence and let the facts speak for themselves. The only question was whether Karen would go quietly or drag the entire community through one final humiliating spectacle of narcissistic rage. Based on her track record, I was betting on the spectacle. The moment of truth arrived like a freight train loaded with justice and documentary evidence. 67 residents packed into the community center, creating an electric atmosphere that smelled like anticipation mixed with the lingering scent of coffee from the concession stand. Channel 7's camera lights cast everything in stark relief, making the moment feel like a courtroom drama about to reach its verdict. Karen sat at the front table wearing her new jewelry-like armor, but her hands were shaking slightly as she shuffled through her stack of fake legal documents. The U-Haul trailer visible through the window told everyone exactly how confident she was about tonight's outcome. "I'd like to present some financial irregularities for board review," I announced, my voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades exposing municipal corruption. "You can't discuss confidential HOA business!" Karen shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that probably scared dogs in the next county. I looked directly at the news camera and smiled. "Ma'am, embezzlement isn't confidential. It's criminal." Bob Martinez stepped up to the projection screen, his accountant's precision cutting through Karen's years of financial fog like a lighthouse beam through storm clouds. The first slide showed Karen's husband's landscaping company, billed $67,000, actual work value $23,000. "This represents a systematic pattern of inflated billing," Bob explained to the stunned audience. "Pool maintenance charge for daily service, actual visits weekly. Legal fees include payments to Mrs. Whitmore's personal divorce attorney paid with community funds." Karen launched herself at Bob's laptop like a rabid wolverine. screaming that the numbers were lies and fabrications. Her desperate attempt to shut down the presentation only made her look more guilty as security camera footage showed financial transfers from HOA accounts directly to her personal banking. Several residents gasped audibly when the Beach Breeze condominium's purchase appeared on screen. $85,000 withdrawn for emergency roof repairs, same day Karen closed on her vacation condo. Her social media posts from that weekend showed her celebrating at the beach while homeowners thought their money was fixing community infrastructure. That's when my investigator's report really drove the knife home, I continued, advancing to slides showing Karen's criminal history. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Karen Whitmore Johnson, serial community destroyer. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as her real identity was revealed. 3 previous communities destroyed by identical schemes. Criminal charges pending in California for grand theft and fraud. Civil judgment in Arizona for $89,000 in restitution, still unpaid. Karen's first complete meltdown began in earnest. She screamed that everything was lies and conspiracy, while her remaining supporters quietly edged toward the exits. When she grabbed for the microphone, her voice cracked with desperation. "This man is dangerous. He threatened to poison our water supply. He's been stalking children." The accusations became increasingly wild and obviously fabricated. She pulled out a clearly forged mental health evaluation with the wrong doctor's license number. The document was so obviously fake that several residents actually laughed out loud. That's when County Prosecutor Williams stood up, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Prosecutor Williams. You're accused of embezzling $127,000 from your neighbors." The camera crew moved closer as Karen realized she'd been recorded committing perjury and making false accusations on live television. Her face went through a spectrum of colors that would have impressed a mood ring. "This is illegal surveillance!" she shrieked, lunging at the camera crew. "You can't record me without permission!" The sound of her designer heels slipping on the polished floor as she stumbled was almost comedic, if the situation weren't so serious. Detective Hayes approached with handcuffs, reading Miranda rights while Karen screamed about conspiracies and illegal persecution. The charges were read clearly for the cameras: embezzlement, fraud, filing false police reports, and intimidation of witnesses. Each count carried serious prison time, and the evidence was overwhelming. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, still shrieking threats at everyone in sight, the community center fell into stunned silence. The U-Haul trailer was immediately searched, revealing stolen HOA property including a commercial-grade lawnmower and pool equipment worth thousands of dollars. After the police cars disappeared into the night, I addressed the shell-shocked residents who remained. "I never wanted to destroy this community," I said, my voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. "I wanted to save it." The applause started slowly with Janet Morrison, then spread like wildfire through the audience. People were crying, hugging, and finally expressing years of suppressed frustration and relief. I proposed an immediate emergency vote to remove Karen from all HOA positions, which passed unanimously since her proxy votes were now invalid. A temporary board was elected on the spot, Bob as treasurer, Janet as secretary, and Lisa Park as president. When someone asked if I wanted a board position, I declined with a smile. "I'd prefer to be an advisor. My lake is always open for community fishing, and I think it's time we started actually being neighbors instead of combatants." The meeting ended with something I hadn't seen in 3 years: neighbors talking to each other like human beings instead of adversaries in a property value war. The taste of victory was sweet, but the real satisfaction came from watching a community begin to heal itself after years of authoritarian abuse. Karen's reign of petty terror was over, and democracy had won with receipts, documentation, and one very expensive U-Haul trailer full of evidence. Justice served with a side of proper financial accounting and a healthy dose of community solidarity. The best part? It was all completely legal, thoroughly documented, and captured on camera for posterity. Sometimes the good guys really do win, especially when they bring better lawyers and actual evidence to the fight. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my dock watching children learn to fish while their parents actually talk to each other like neighbors instead of property value warriors. The smell of grilling burgers from our first annual Lake Day Festival drifts across the water, mixing with the pine scent and sound of genuine laughter, something this community hadn't heard in years. Karen got 4 years in state prison after pleading guilty to avoid trial. The asset forfeiture process recovered most of the stolen money, including her precious beach condo that was seized faster than you could say emergency roof repairs. Her husband Rick was extradited from Oklahoma and received 18 months for conspiracy, while fake Inspector Randy got probation and a permanent ban from any government work. The new HOA board implemented what we called the transparency revolution. All financial records are posted online monthly. Competitive bidding is required for any contract over $1,000, and quarterly town halls replaced Karen's secretive board meetings. We repealed every one of her oppressive rules, turning the community covenant from a weapon of harassment into actual guidelines for neighborly living. The zoning crisis that could have destroyed 31 homes was resolved through genuine community cooperation. I used my municipal connections to help navigate the variance renewal process, working with county planning to create a sustainable development plan that protected both the environment and property values. The community now has permanent grandfather status, and 15 problematic houses were relocated at the developer's expense to meet environmental standards. My lake became the heart of our healing community. Sarah's Sanctuary, named after my late wife, now hosts fishing lessons for neighborhood kids, community canoe storage, and peaceful evening swims for anyone who needs therapy as much as I did. The dock pop built in 1952 has been expanded to accommodate the whole neighborhood, and the sound of children playing in the water would have made Sarah smile. The ripple effect spread far beyond our little subdivision. Megan Torres' investigative series won a regional Emmy, and the story went viral with the headline, "How One Man Saved His Community from HOA Tyrant." I ended up testifying before the state legislature about HOA accountability reform, helping draft what became known as Karen's Law, legislation requiring annual independent audits and transparent financial reporting for all homeowner associations. 3 other local communities requested my help with their own problem boards, and I discovered a calling I never expected. There's something deeply satisfying about using 20 years of municipal finance experience to help neighbors take back their communities from petty dictators who think property ownership comes with feudal privileges. The financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Between asset seizure, insurance claims, and recovered stolen property, we actually ended up with more money than before Karen's crime spree. Monthly assessments dropped to $180, lower than when Karen first took power, and our reserve fund is healthier than ever. Property values increased 12% after Karen's removal, proving that good governance and community spirit are better for real estate prices than authoritarian rule and constant litigation. Who would have thought that treating neighbors like human beings actually makes neighborhoods more desirable? Personally, the lake that saved my sanity after Sarah's death has become something even more meaningful, a symbol of community healing and shared purpose. Grief over my wife's loss will always be part of me, but channeling that pain into helping others has given life new meaning. Last week, I received a call from a desperate homeowner in Tennessee. Another HOA corruption story involving a veteran whose disability modifications were being blocked by a power-hungry board president. "Sir, I heard about what you did in North Carolina," the voice said, trembling with frustration and hope. "My HOA is trying to fine me for installing wheelchair ramps." I looked out at my lake where Janet Morrison was teaching her granddaughter to cast a fishing line while Bob Martinez grilled burgers for the monthly community cookout. The sound of neighbors actually enjoying each other's company filled the evening air like music. "Tell me everything," I said, already reaching for my notebook. "Let's see what we can do." Because here's what I learned from this whole experience. Petty tyrants only win when good people stay silent. But when neighbors band together with proper documentation, legal knowledge, and the courage to fight back, justice isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The best revenge against corrupt authority isn't more corruption. It's building something better, together. If you've got your own HOA nightmare story, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of these tales are absolutely wild. Trust me, Karen wasn't even the worst I've heard about. And hey, if this story helped you think differently about standing up to petty tyrants in your own life, smash that subscribe button. Because there are more community justice stories where this came from, and next week's tale involves an HOA president who tried to steal a veteran's service dog. You absolutely will not believe how that one ends. Sometimes the good guys really do win, especially when they bring receipts, proper legal representation, and the unshakable belief that neighbors deserve better than living under the thumb of narcissistic bullies. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some trout to feed and a community to enjoy.
Share your thoughts down below and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.